everyone? Another new edition of Celtics Beat here, and this one's going to be a little bit different than what we typically do, because last time out, we had Sean Grandy, as I always like to tell him, the longtime voice of the Boston Celtics, to kind of take us through the post-mortem of the season, and I thought, maybe we should do like a reaction to the draft, but honestly, what is there to react to? Or a free agency primer. There's not a whole lot that's going to happen there necessarily. So I want us to kind of all work through this together. I'm Adam Kaufman, as you probably know by now. Evan Valenti, of course, is here. Seth Landman, who has been part of this show in the past, including during the playoffs. And another guy who is frequently part of the group text, Corey Goodman, joining us. And yeah, this is going to be kind of a let's all figure this out together, how we're feeling, how positive we should be, how negative we should be, and what the top concerns are going into the offseason. Because for the first time in a long time, we can sit here and convincingly say, guys, Celtics are a contender. The Celtics have proven they are a contender, and not just by reaching the finals, but the road that they took to get there, it certainly wasn't a fluke. People should absolutely expect them to be back in the conversation next year, whether or not they're back there in the finals or not. Who knows? That's not an easy thing to accomplish, unless I guess you have LeBron or Steph Curry. But for the most part, the Celtics have shown who they are. And everybody of note, barring a trade, is back. Everybody in the rotation is back. So what we have here is the $6.5 roughly $1 million mid-level exception to look forward to, and any potential trades. And this is the main topic across our text threads, and I'm sure it's what Celtics fans out there are talking about as well. What happens with the $17 million TPE that expires in July if it's not used? Will ownership spend, as Wick Grossbeck has on the record said he's going to? And Brad Stevens gave a little hint the other day that maybe they won't. Maybe they won't. So we're going to find out. Evan, how you feeling right now? How do you feel about all of this?
Well, the number one thing in my mentions right now is not the TPE. It's the Celtics need a point guard, but I'm sure we'll get to that later.
Yeah. Screw the DPOY.
I was fending off people for 2 days, but I will continue to do so. I will continue to pound it into people's brains, but we'll get to that later. The TPE stuff, look, normally when you have a team like this, you don't really have an opportunity for a major upgrade like Boston has the ability to. Now, it takes two to tango. And it takes some chicanery here and some looking around. I'm sure in some text threads I've mentioned just monitoring what's happening in Phoenix, and maybe see if you can steal somebody. I really enjoyed Ryan Bernardone's thought about just calling about Cam Johnson to see if they want to save the DeAndre Ayton situation in Phoenix. I would just call about him because he would be absolutely perfect for this team.
I thought you were going to say Jay Crowder because everybody.
Well, Jay Crowder's not bad, but I think we've seen the Jay Crowder thing. I like that he's multi-positional. He would have, a much smaller role on this team. They already know what he's about. So that's not the worst idea in the world. I don't mind that. I think they could try and go for some more upside there, but I don't hate that. But there's several TPEs they can use. And it's a matter of find the right group of guys to put with this core. And you're going to have opportunities to do so. It's just, who's actually out there that's available. I mean, it's going to be Brad and Mike Zarin doing a lot of phone calls and trying to figure things out. The one thing that I question, and Seth probably got this lined up somewhere, is what picks are they allowed to trade versus, what guys are they bringing in, and are they going to absorb picks coming back? Like the Duncan Robinson thing, he could fit into that trade exception, the $17.1 million one, and maybe you can get a first rounder back for that. And I was kind of hopeful if that would happen pre-draft, so my David Roddy pipe dream could have come to fruition.
I haven't looked on Twitter. Are you still a David Roddy stan on Twitter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I should just put Grizzlies stan at this point because they've drafted two of my favorite guys in recent memory. But, Boston finding a way to be opportunistic, because that is something that, some of these cap, teams have a ton of cap space. They can kind of provide a haven, so to speak, for teams that are cap strapped, trying to clear, like the Knicks are trying to clear space for Jaylen Brunson. Everybody knows that. Somebody should call the Knicks and say, hey, we'll take X off your books, but you got to give us X, Y, and Z or whatever. So trying to be the team that does that, trying to find, if you're the third wheel, that's going to be some maneuvering. And I understand why Brad went on and said what he said, but at the same time, they're going to be calling everybody. And I'm curious, the panel here, if people have a specific guy in mind for some of these TPs that Seth and Corey, I don't know where you guys fall in terms of like, if they could find a way, and I don't know if this is possible. I've heard it is, I've heard it's not. Like, I love the idea of Kyle Anderson, but I don't know if that's even remotely possible there because of certain things in his contract. We talked about in the group chat about the Gallinari thing, how that may or may not be possible. And I kind of like that idea, but I'm not quite sure where the rest of the gang falls here between Corey and Seth.
Couple quick things, Corey. Just know that because I know you haven't been on the show before, and I'm just going to assume you've listened to the show, and if you haven't, lie to me. But you can
great show. Must listen.
Yeah, you can. Feel free to we're not going to all talk over each other, but do feel free to interrupt if you just completely object to something.
No, yeah, I'll be happy to do that.
So
I'll jump in first.
Please,
I agree with everything you said. I think they will try to use the TP. I think that my guy is Kyle Kuzma. I think that's Seth's guy too. I just like an athletic wing who could be a legitimate scorer on the second unit, who potentially could crack that like A1 unit, the last 7 minutes of the playoff game that you need to win. Guys,
Game
good
4 rings a bell.
What's that?
Game 4 rings a bell.
Yeah, it does ring a bell. But really every game essentially. Game 3 they're okay, but 4 through 6 essentially. Just having that guy, an athletic wing who could spell the Jays. Really, that's my only wish list in the offseason is to get somebody who could, because I think they've got their playoff rotation. They've got their core guys. They're in such a good spot right now, in my opinion. This is positivity, Corey. They're in such a good spot. They've got their core. They're in great shape. Now, can they add to that second unit that's going to spell the Jays? Certainly spell Rob, given his injury situation, and so that they can be really built for the fourth quarter of the playoffs. That's my issue. If they can get Kyle Kuzma or even KCP, like one of those guys. I would look into Washington, see what kind of options they have there. Now, 2 to tango. Can they put together a package to get it done? That's a whole other thing. I think they'll try, and that's really all I'm hoping for, an effort.
So do you believe they're going to try, or do you believe they're going to say they tried? Because
I think
you don't believe, just to let people behind the curtain, you don't believe this $17 million TP is getting used.
Me? Or
Seth? No, me.
Seth.
Here's how I would put it. I just I'll believe it when I see it. I'm like very skeptical. And what Brad's quote recently about what did he say exactly? Like, we're not going to, if that thing expires, we still have 2 other ones, I think was basically what he said. So that to me sounds like what it feels like to me is a situation where there'll be a lot of patting themselves on the back about being in the luxury tax for the first time in a while, but believing that the average fan isn't going to quite be aware of the fact that they have a chance to go $25 to $30 million over the luxury tax. They could add.
You pay more attention to the cap ramifications and stuff than I do. So if just to paint it out for people, if they use the $17 million TP and bring in a guy, what is the penalty? How much are you actually paying for that guy based on what you need to go into the tax? I
believe it's a dollar for dollar tax. Until you if you pay, it depends how many years you've been over the tax, how much you pay.
That's why Golden State is ridiculous, because they've been doing it for so long. It's just,
that's right.
Theirs is higher than their salary cap.
Yeah.
But so the real question, it's the Celtics are going to have opportunities, and first of all, they haven't paid the tax in previous seasons, so they're not at any risk of being in the repeater tax. So to me, this and after next year, I think we all would probably agree at this point that Al Horford will be coming back on his full $26 million salary next year, which means at the end of next year, they're either renegotiating some new contract with Horford or he's gone, and he's not going to be making that much anymore. So there's at the end of next year, to me, there's a significant amount of money actually coming off the books because they have all these guys under contract already. And Tice actually has a team option in 2 years. So next year could be his last year also. So to me, it feels like this is the year to spend a bunch of they just made the finals. There's just no reason for this not to be a year where you spend a ton of money, because if it doesn't work out, if the worst case scenario of every move you make happens, next summer you have all these opportunities to get back under the tax. And so like what would be really I want them to like go out and get good players. Like I think probably to get Kuzma, you're like giving up some sort of draft capital, but like at worst, like the like at least they have to do something. Like the $17 million trade exception that they have that will expire. If they don't add a player with that, they lose the opportunity. There's no other means of adding a player of that quality. So like to go back to Evan's example, I would say like you look at the teams who are looking to shed salary, like the Knicks, for example. If the Knicks are willing to give you one of the first round picks that they just picked up to move like Alec Burks or Nerlens Noel or something, like that's like such a low risk move that those guys come off the books after next year. And if everything goes terribly, you just package that pick that you got with the guy at the trade deadline and get like you're not even committed in this season. So that to me, I'll just be like so disappointed if they don't add a couple of rotation pieces, even if they're not ideal pieces. It just has to be like 8th, 9th, 10th guys.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm curious if, as Evan referred to it before, I think aptly so, if the panel agrees with this sentiment. I tweeted this out the other day, and I honestly, I feel pretty strongly about it, is they're not going to add, unfortunately, they're not going to add just to add. They're going to add, a piece that they feel makes sense. And what I mean by that in this, like Evan mentioned Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson, to me, like there's no chance of him coming here. And the reason for that is because he doesn't defend. He doesn't defend well. Like defense is the backbone of what got them to the finals. That's what makes, like Evan brought it up before, all of the we need a point guard trademark a smart talk so funny, is because like he is the linchpin of, he's not just the defensive player of the year, first team all defense. He is the linchpin. He is what makes all the switching. He's what makes everything work for the league's best defense, almost wire to wire throughout the year and then into the playoffs.
Can I just add one thing to that, which
please.
is that it's not just that he's a great, like that he's the linchpin, he's the best communicator, he's the best defender. It's specifically having him at the position of point guard. It's
I mean, you guys are gonna be freaking mad again. So I mean, well, I could rant about this as long as you want, but I think we should save that because
all I was going to say, like in regard to all of this as it relates to a guy like Robinson, is that and I know that was just an example, but like if you're the Celtics, if you're Ime, if you're Brad, like you're not looking to add a guy who you have to cover up on defense on the floor or is going to get exploited and therefore is unplayable in the game's most important minutes. They're going to want, I'm not saying Derek White is the prime example here, but they're going to want another guy, ideally, obviously someone who's a wing who can give you offense and bench scoring and all the stuff that the team has talked about already, but also has to be at least playable to above average on defense. He doesn't have to be elite. He doesn't have to be, all whatever team and excellent. He has to be serviceable on defense. Otherwise, they're not going to bother, because they're like, not to go all the way back to like Isaiah Thomas and all the king in the fourth BS. But the reason that he was so good in the fourth quarter offensively is because he freaking had to be, because he was giving up that many points on the other side. Kemba didn't work defensively. Like there are all these different, Peyton Pritchard lost time because of, and he's not even a bad defender. He's just not a great defender. So that's what this team is, to me, going to be looked for. So it really narrows your list of the types of guys that they would potentially be bringing in who make around that $17 million window.
Well, I want to push back on that though for a minute. I don't necessarily think it has to be like Duncan Robinson is a tough one for multiple reasons. One, where's his confidence at after this last postseason run? Because he was buried on the bench. If you can find a way to get like 2 years ago Duncan Robinson out of him, I'm interested in that, because like as much as we want to talk about how poor his defense is, when you're surrounded by 4 other really good defenders, I think it's okay. If you have length and size, like that's where the Pritchard thing is tough, because he's really short, and it's not for a lack of trying. Like Peyton hustles his ass off, but it's just because he's short and get picked on at the end of games, or picked on by really good point guards, or if you have a big wing player that can, facilitate your offense. Unfortunately, Payton's going to get picked on. And if he's not shooting the lights out, it's just like, all right, well, we can't, if they're going to target him and our offense isn't, going full tilt here, we just can't afford to have him out there. Like, I think there's an argument that can be made that, someone that isn't like amazing defensively, but is a little bit taller and a little bit longer. Like, I find that's okay. I don't know if Duncan Robinson is the guy specifically because I don't know where his confidence is at. I just, after watching him in that last series against Miami, it was like, man, what? I mean, they weren't even playing him unless they were desperate. And it was like, all right, let's see if Duncan's got anything right now. And like when Tyler Hero wasn't playing, it was like, let's see if he can recreate a little bit of the Hero magic, but he just couldn't do it. So it's like one of those things where ideally, like if that person wasn't great defensively, but was either a knockdown shooter or B, a good one-on-one scorer / creator, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of defense to help out the Jays either get a breather and they can control the offense for a little bit, or B, make life easier for the Jays when they're on the floor at the same time because the spacing will be better and the attention can't solely be driven towards the Jays. So I get the point of that, but I think there should be just a little pushback on that because like not everybody's going to be an all-world defender. This team is loaded with them. It's amazing how they've been able to build this team. So I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of defense to get something else. But if it, I would say if they can't create the half court and they're not like knockdown shooters, then yeah, I wouldn't even entertain the idea because unless like they were some all-world defensive player. So.
Yeah, I need my guy to be representative on defense, right? I mean, I think I see Seth nodding. I think he agrees. I mean, it's okay if he's not all world. I mean, I am so out in Duncan Robinson. I can't even tell you. I want no part of him, and it's not just for his confidence issues, because I think that they potentially have like a mini Duncan Robinson on the roster already in Sam Hauser. I'd rather Sam Hauser get some run, honestly.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's not the same guy, but he's a reasonable facsimile if he could get some minutes and get some confidence. So that I want no part of Duncan Robinson. I mean, his defense aside, but yeah, I think any guy, I mean, like a Norman Powell, something like that, somebody who actually plays defense and can also shoot. I'm much more interested in one of those guys.
It's an interesting question of like how big a guy has to be or how like not bad at defense. Like a guy I keep thinking about is Joe Ingles. Like Joe Ingles isn't like a great one-on-one defender, but he's like a pretty smart team defender. Like I think if a guy like knows how to play good team defense, they can fit on this Celtics team, like with all the switching and the fact that Robert Williams is like a freak who can cover insane amounts of ground. It like I would also just add that I'm like equally interested in passing as I am to shooting as like a skill that we need on this team. Like I think a lot of people were concerned about the Derek White fit, and then he like proceeded to miss a ton of shots, like not shoot the ball really well, but he actually helped the offense. Like like the ability to like make smart decisions and drive the ball or pass and cut, all that stuff matters like just as much as shooting, I think.
So maybe when Celtics do their part in letting Will Hardy go to the Jazz, then Danny Ainge can send Joe Ingles back the other way.
Well, he's a free agent, but yeah.
Well, even better, he can help maneuver it, just help massage it, tell him how great Boston is.
Well, he also got traded to Portland last year, but
I forgot about that. I did forget about him going to Portland.
Joe Ingles, I like the idea of him, but coming off that injury, I'm not totally positive what that's going to look like. But I do like the idea of him. Yeah.
Just an example of someone who's like big and a decently smart defender and a good shooter, really but not like a great one-on-one defender.
Excellent ball mover, so he'd be one of the connector guys.
I just want to say I feel better about not remembering the trade to Portland, considering he never actually wore a Blazers uniform.
Oh yeah, no, he was hurt. That's why they traded him. Yeah.
Yes, and I was gonna make when I was making my point too about them being representative. I agree. I mean, I think what's unique about this team is, it's been a few weeks now, but I don't think the defense really ever let them down, really, for any long stretch of the playoffs. I mean, that team defensive concept is so firm there, right? That I think you're just looking for guys who aren't just zeros on defense. They can slide in and actually play the team defense concept. And if you think about it in that perspective, there's just a larger pool of candidates who could help this team, right? You don't need a guy who's a terrific one-on-one defender because he doesn't need to be on this team.
Right? Yeah, you just gotta not have any like I wouldn't be interested in like Jordan Clarkson or like if someone like really like doesn't defend one-on-one and gets lost in the team situation, like that seems useless. But it's true, like what Corey's saying about the team defense, like they struggled at times to like prevent the Warriors from scoring points, but that had much more to do with turning the ball over on offense than it did with their half-court defense.
And had a lot to do with. So I was gonna say, and it had a lot to do with Golden State just being really, really good. You know,
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
that's-
look at
incredible shooters.
look at the 4 losses the Celtics had in the finals. 103, 104, 107, 107. It's not like they were giving up a ton of points.
You would sign up for that every time. You would sign up for that if I told you in the 4 losses that they would score 107 points, 108 points max. You sign up for that every time because
problem is they didn't break 100 in any of those games.
Yeah, that's the problem, and that's the big discussion that we've had is like, where does this Boston team actually really need? And those 4 losses right there should tell you exactly. Like, they have a really good defensive team already.
Yeah.
If they can add to that, great. But this team is starving for offense, and part of that's going to be fixed by like trying to manage the Jays' minutes and keeping them fresh at the end of the season.
That's it.
Part of it too.
It's a strange offseason that I am so really at peace with this team because
God.
it's so obvious to me, right? And I feel like it's obvious to them, right? You just saw them, you know, they weren't a good second half team in the finals for the most part outside of game 1, right? But they, and it's just obvious. They're just they played 7 games in the previous 2 series, and it's just a lot of minutes for the Jays, and they, Pritchard and Grant and White, they didn't have good finals, and those guys, when Tatum had to play 42, 43 minutes, I mean, you just add it up, and you saw that there's no legs. They didn't have any legs.
40 minutes.
Well, and like Ime highlighted, he'd been playing basketball since the Olympics of 2021 with like no break at all.
And another thing too, he's playing defense.
That's it.
There were games when it looked like he was sort of disengaged or wasn't playing well and all this stuff. But he's playing defense. I mean, outside the possessions where he like jumps into third row trying to draw a foul, he's getting back and he's playing defense. He's switching. I mean, the amount of effort it must take. I mean, I'm exhausted watching them. Just the amount of effort it must take switching on every possession. And when you get to the finals, every possession is so critical. And he's a focal point on both ends of the floor. I mean, it adds up. To me, whenever there was close games in the fourth quarter, beyond being just generally negative and pessimistic, I was thinking, this is not going to be the game that Tatum carries him in the fourth quarter. How could it be? He's got to be exhausted.
Well, and you saw it like I think it's interesting that him and Doncic were like had their first like. Tatum's had long playoff runs before, but Doncic had his first long playoff run. Right. Tatum made it all the way to the finals for the first time, and Luka went through this whole journey in these playoffs of like being a terrible defender, being shamed about being a terrible defender, and like playing harder on defense. And I think when they had to play the Warriors, you saw it like start to take something out of him too. Like, I do think for some of these young guys, it's like the first. Like when you go through your first like really hard playoff experience that way where you're playing both ends, it sort of makes sense that that they wore down. But you also see like the way the Celtics defense is capable of wearing down other guys. Like, I mean, like Giannis kind of like did wear down by the end of that series. I mean, obviously it's a different series if they have Middleton, but I think it like, we're going to find ourselves in this situation with this team, I think occasionally, of complaining about the offense. And I think a lot of it is going to be that like, it's not the kind of team where the superstars on offense get to like sit out possessions on the other end.
And that makes them enjoyable, right? I mean, you see Tatum and Jaylen, it's an effort thing, right? I mean, it's execution on the defensive end, but just so much effort. If you just watch every possession, so much effort, you just wonder how they can play 40, 42 minutes. And then you see that, the last like 5-6 minutes of these games, they're not really playing. They're just like struggling to get down the court. So expecting them to match Curry, in the fourth quarter of a finals or, Clay, that's asking a lot, especially when they played so many minutes leading up to that series.
Because we're sort of in our own way saying the same thing about sort of what the Celtics team needs to do, what it needs to work on. Corey highlighted like it's not just like 4 idiots in a Zoom. Like the Celtics are well aware, like it's plain as day, to every what they need to work on. And Brad has talked about more playmaking and obviously more bench scoring. You've heard Ime in recent days talk about the same thing. What I feel like is not being discussed at all publicly, at least by the team. I mean, maybe by members of the media. I'm not going to sit here and say I've listened to everything, but I don't know where I'd rank it. It would be tough to call it the number one need for this team, just based on everything we've discussed about the lack of offense and needing that and giving, spelling Tatum and Brown and everything. But to me, just such a huge need this offseason. I feel like I'd love to be wrong, but I feel confident about this. I don't think you can depend on Robert Williams. Just, hopefully he makes it through a season healthy, but you can't bank on it. And Al Horford is going to take a dramatic step back. I think he is going to take a dramatic step back next year. And it's not a knock on Horford, by the way, in saying this. The reason that I believe that, one, he's 36, so he's a year older. He's not coming off a half season at Club Thunder where he doesn't have to do anything. He just played a whole long year and tons of minutes, didn't miss too many games, tack on a 2-month playoff run, and the most exerting, physical experience he's probably ever had in his professional career. And he's doing it at the age of 35 into 36. And now he's got a shortened off season going into the start of next year. I just don't think Horford, he played like he looked like he was 30 years old most of this year. I don't think he's going to be remotely that next year. And there's only so much, Daniel Tice is fine in the regular season, but he's not a guy that I'm going to count on come the playoffs. So I feel like a big who is defensive minded, again, I'm not concerned with what he's giving you offensively. A big who is defensive minded, to me, is such a glaring need for this team going into next year. But I don't know, am I on an island with this, Seth?
Can I disagree with you?
Please, I hope you do, but it's how I feel.
Well, I'm curious to hear what everyone has to say, but I would just say that I think you're right that Tice is decent for the regular season, and my pro Tice, I know they didn't play him in the playoffs, and I know he's not someone you can really rely on in the playoffs, but what I would say about Tice is that the advantage that you have with Tice is that he's pretty decent at everything, in a way that makes him a really useful backup for Horford. In Horford, there's this combination of skills that is that's just incredibly rare, and it is a huge reason for why the Celtics were what they were last year. But he can do all the different things that you'd want a big man to do. He's not great at any of them necessarily. He's not top 1% at any of them, but he's decent at all of them. And Tice is the same way. You can run all the same stuff that you run with Horford with Tice. It's not going to be great, but and Tice has proven with the Celtics in years past that they can have a decent regular season with him playing huge minutes. So I guess I would just say that the idea that you're going to add somebody, I just don't know who you're going to add that's better than Tice. That's I don't really know where we're getting the resources to do that, to add somebody that's capable of cracking a playoff rotation over him. So I see the need for
I'm not even saying, just to interject, I'm not even saying that it's to crack a playoff rotation ahead of Tice as much as I'm saying I'm worried about the big man depth next year.
Well, it's just about allocating minutes, I think, trying to find a way to keep Rob and Al's minutes manageable through the regular season. And that's why when you bring up the Nerlens Noel, from the Knicks, get him with one of these TPEs, I'm very into that because I know what I'm getting in Nerlens Noel. And he wouldn't replace wouldn't replace Al, so to speak, but maybe he could, find a way to duplicate what Rob gives you. Now, he's not going to do that. Let's just get this out of the way. Rob Williams is a significantly more special player than Nerlens Noel. I'm not trying to clown on Nerlens, just trying to hype up my guy.
Rob's like a unicorn.
Rob is really unbelievable. But Nerlens can give you some interior defensive presence, which I really like. It would feel good to have the New England kid come back home. I would personally love that. And I think, he's mature enough now at this point to know that, look, Nerlens, you're not going to score 20 a game. That's not who you are. We have established that, I think he was the 5th or 6th pick years ago. That ship has sailed. But to stay in the NBA and to quote Jaylen Rose, to keep getting them checks, you got to find a way to be an impactful person. And I think Nerlens has that in him. What would be really amazing, and I don't know what his health status is at this point. I know there's been some stories on it, but I don't think there's been any recently. This team is screaming for Aaron Baines so bad. But I don't know where he's at. I know he had a really complicated health issue a little while back, and I hope everything's okay. And honestly, if he's fine but can't play basketball anymore, I'm okay with that. But he would have been literally quite perfect for what they wanted to do. A guy that can really shoot a little bit, can pass a little bit, really great defense on the inside, tough as hell. I would have loved that idea.
Tommy had come out of the ground if you got Aaron Baines back on this team.
Oh my goodness, man. I mean, it's not like there's not going to be some perfect guy. Like there's not. Boston has two big men that are really hard to recreate in Al Horford and Rob Williams. Okay, so you're not going to find anybody that does that kind of stuff. But if you can find guys that can give you a little bit of this, a little bit of that, so you can keep those two minutes at a manageable level. Like, because again, when you get to the playoffs, like they're probably not going to play. Like Nerlens, maybe. Tice, maybe. But like we've seen Boston kind of likes going small. And if like Grant can hit a few more shots, it makes it way viable. But like they just need to have another depth option for the regular season to get those guys to the postseason when they be. That's to me, Adam, was my number 2 thing on my list in terms of what Boston needs to do. Now I know Seth disagreed with me on that a little bit, but I think trying to keep those guys fresh has to be a huge thing. Now, if it's like, they just need to play smaller and commit to small ball more, then I'm like, okay, I understand that. And like maybe that's where Kuzma slides in here as like a small ball 4 who's actually a really good rebounder, can stretch the floor, all that stuff. Maybe that's how they do it. But they need to find a way to not play those two guys as many minutes as they did this past season.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done with the Aaron Baines experiment, so I'm going to pass on that. I mean, it's, to me, it's clear that the second need here is another big. I just don't think it's that big of a need. It's being dwarfed by another wing in my bugs. Because I just think obviously we don't know what Rob's health's going to be, and he's probably going to be limited in the regular season given the wear and tear on the injured knee in the playoffs. I just think you need a body, really, just anybody. I wouldn't expend a lot of money or any resources to get that person. That's my view, because I think you go small. I mean, I'm all about just getting better players, really, because you insert better players into I don't care. This is not an argument about positionless basketball, although maybe it is. I just think they need better players, and I'm not really fixed on they need a guy who's 6'11" to play some minutes. And even though I hate Daniel Tice, and Kaufman and Landman know this, I complain about it the entire playoffs. Actually, I do. I actually like Daniel Tice. Like I've been a Daniel Tice guy, and to me, I kind of agree with Seth's point. I think that for him, it's not an execution thing necessarily. It's an ability thing, right? He's just not that good anymore, right? I think you could trust him to be on the floor and do the right things most times. He's just not good, right? So he can't play in the playoffs. But if you need him to play, 10, 12 minutes a night in the regular season, I'm okay with that. I just, I'm really worried. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was thinking, I started to have when there was all this like post, in the immediate aftermath of the season ending and all this, slander about Marcus Smart, I started to get kind of concerned. Like, this is, I was at peace really mostly, but I was a little concerned that they're going to try to deal smart and say, you know what, this is a major need. We need another big. And, we have 2 good point guards we like. We're going to trade, the guys on a good contract and get a big replacement. I'm a little worried about that they get too creative there and start thinking that way, because they're thinking need and less about the structure of the team. But, I'm good. I'm good with I'm so focused just on get that wing, get Kyle Kuzma and then, or just good players. It could be Luke Kennard. I mean, anyway, just get good players for that second unit, and then everything will fall into place, I think.
Well, so let's focus on. Well, I was going to say, let's focus on what is doable. Like, hopefully all these TPs don't expire and something does get used, especially I think there are 3 or 4 that are in excess of $5 million. So you can bring in, it's not just all these like $1.5 million here, $2 million there. Like you can bring in players that can be part of your rotation, not just bodies. But, what we know they have is this 6.4, whatever it is, $1 million mid-level tax exception that is not going to be, a day one use when free agency starts, in the middle of the week here. But, it's after vets sort of find out there's no money for them on the market and they start to examine, all right, all these teams can offer me the same amount of money, which is the best option for me. And they look at the contenders, obviously, there are going to be guys that are interesting pieces. And, there was an article and look, it's for you guys or anyone out there listening to judge whether you think these are even realistic or whether you want them or whatever. But, an article that caught my eye from NBC Sports Boston and one of the writers there, Darren Hartwell, wrote, listed 8 as he deemed them anyway. And I haven't gone into this to really, look at it, but he deemed them 8 realistic options that could bolster the team with that mid-level tax exception. And he listed TJ Warren, who, Corey, I know you have thoughts on, Otto Porter Jr., switching sides, Bruce Brown, who I just feel like at 25 is going to command a lot more money than that, but maybe I'm wrong. Patty Mills, could continue to bounce around. Gary Harris, Kyle Anderson, who again is another guy I feel like would make more money than that. Nick Batum, who we've heard linked to the Celtics, and I think and Isaiah Hartenstein was listed here as well on the subject of bigs. So whether Seth, because I know you wanted to say something too, whether it's one of those guys I just listed or somebody else who's on your mind, who do you think is a realistic fit for that money that the Celtics do actually have to spend right now?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few guys on that list that I don't think are. Hartenstein's under contract with the Clippers. Like, they're gonna overpay. Like, the Clippers are the team that I wish like we were spending money because they just like throw money around as an advantage. Like, they like see their willingness to spend money as a competitive advantage and actually use it that way. And like Mills, I just think is like a bad fit with this team defensively. But I love the TJ Warren idea. I would just like to briefly go back to the center thing. It's like, because there's like 4 resources that we're talking about. It's like the big $17 million TPE. There's like a 6.9, I think, at a $5.9 million TPE. And then what you're talking about is the mid-level exception. So the TPEs you can only use to bring in guys who are already under contract. And then the mid-level exception could be any free agent. So like you do have a little more freedom with that. But I think like we saw last year, like you can have a lot of like pipe dreams about what you get with that taxpayer mid-level, and then you end up with like Dennis Schroeder bogging down your offense for a bunch of months. Like,
but there's just a difference though between that team and this team now, because now now
we know it's a terrible idea to get Dennis Schroeder.
No, this is like,
well, now we know what their identity is.
Why did Patty Mills pick Brooklyn over Boston? Because Brooklyn had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving and James Harden at the time, and had way more street cred as an NBA Finals contender. Boston now is the team from the East that just lost in the NBA Finals. So now that destination is a little more attractive for maybe a guy trying to get one more contract and trying to, like, TJ Warren. Like, I honestly don't think, I just think very highly of TJ Warren, and I think that he could probably do better than that. But let's say if you're TJ Warren, you're like,
I'll played 4 games the last 2 years.
Yeah, well, let's just say, like, if you're TJ Warren, like, I'll take the mid-level. I'll run the second unit for Boston when the Jays are on the bench. I'll score, like, X amount of points a game, and then I'll get a look from somebody else that'll overpay for me. Like, that's the scenario that Boston is now. That's the advantageous scenario that Boston's now put themselves into because of this finals run. Now, there are other teams like this, too. Like, Milwaukee's going to be bringing people aboard. We have this really interesting PJ Tucker, like 76ers rumor going on, which I find very interesting. The Lakers are always going to be there because of their LA status and the fact that they have LeBron and all that stuff. But Boston's now in that conversation, and it makes convincing someone of a TJ Warren status. Now, again, I don't know if it's going to be him, but convincing someone like that, like, yes, this is where you need to go to rehab your image, to spell us, and then like parlay that into a ginormous deal somewhere else. Like, let's just call it is. Like, you can do so much better than Dennis Schroeder at this point. And like, Schroeder just didn't fit, and they tried like hell to make it work. But like, once he left and Pritchard came in, it was just like, oh yeah, this is way better, right?
Just the part where he left is enough, actually.
Yeah, but like, now that you're in this
addition
spot,
by subtraction,
you can be a little more choosy about it, right? You can look around and say like, yeah, again, I don't think Patty Mills would be good for this team. Like, I love Patty Mills, but like, no, like, he would get cooked on defense, and then offensively, like, if he's not hitting shots, you have the same problem with Peyton Pritchard. Like, it's just, you don't want to create another problem like that. So it's just, given their status now of finals contender versus last year, coming off the year from hell, new coach, new system, like, what is this team? Now we know what they are. And it's easier for a guy to see the path to the next contract via this mid-level exception.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, a year ago, we couldn't, if we rewind it back here, we could not be having this conversation about TJ Warren. If it was your current day TJ Warren, it wouldn't even be on the table. It's on the table now for all those reasons, Evan. Like this, I mean, for 1 year, I mean, if I'm TJ Warren, certainly he can get more money than 6.3 this year. Absolutely. But if I was his friend, and I wish I was, I would tell him, now listen, go to Boston. They were 2 games away. They play defense, you play defense.
They weren't away.
Yeah, they play defense. You play defense. They're looking for a guy, a wing who's gonna be the 6th guy, kind of the guy's gonna lead that second unit, potentially play key minutes in the playoffs down the stretch. That's you. And then let's revisit free agency in a year and really cash in. I mean, to me it makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying it's gonna happen. I just think this is sort of like a weird with his injury history and where where he's come back from. It's weirdly aligned, where it just kind of makes sense. Like it could work for a year. So I'm getting excited, and I'll be disappointed, if it doesn't happen. But it could. It's very real. I think that it does make a lot of sense. You can certainly get more than what we can offer, but we, for once, really for the first time in a long time, we offer a really, really unique situation to free agents. Really unique. Like, hey, this is fun. Look at what just happened. This team's having fun. They're young. It's not, take L out of it. It's not like these guys are all 36, 37. Young, new coach, a young coach. This is a good place to be, even if it's just for a year.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with like all of that. I guess like to me, it does. I guess the downside I would just say is that it feels a little bit like what happens with the buyout market every year, where this like these same conversations come up, and like it's just so rare that those guys move the needle. So like when you're talking about that, like that's why the resource that we being the Celtics have that I want us to use is the $17.1 million or 17 million, whatever it is, dollar trade exception. Cause like, that's the piece where you can bring in somebody who's like a
Truly
real,
impactful.
yeah.
It's harder to do though. I mean, that's the thing. And when you were saying earlier about,
well, it's not, but they can. I mean, like they just have to spend the money.
They can do it. I mean, but you were saying earlier about Brad, and you sort of doubting what he was. He's sort of implying that they're not going to do it. My read of that situation was that he's saying that this is up in 3 weeks. I mean, it's a small window here to pull it together. I mean, it probably doesn't take that much time to pull it together, but it's about to expire, right? So there's a lot of pieces need to fall into place. You need 2 partners to do it. So it's more, to me, I read it as don't think we didn't try if it doesn't happen, but it can be challenging.
That's why because it's expiring, I would say like that's why I laid out like the least of what they need to do. Like the thing where you just take on like a mediocre player who someone is trying to get off their books, just so you keep that salary slot as like a thing. If you get to the trade deadline and you need a piece to add,
right,
you don't have to trade one of your really good players. You can cobble together a bunch of players who aren't good. And that's why I sort of like those Knicks, like the guys the Knicks are trying to get rid of. It's not that I love those guys as players. It's like if it doesn't work out, you either have the salary slot to move in a trade, or you just use the draft pick that came with those guys to unload them again. Then,
well, if I'm not mistaken, the next 2 largest TPEs that they have expire at the trade deadline. So it's not even like they need to be sort of focused on a million different things right now. Like the singular focus, other than I guess again the mid level, the singular focus is that TPE. Like that's what you're working on right now. And there is, I hadn't even really thought about that, but what Seth has brought up a couple of times, if you're willing to spend just to absorb that salary, it's a conversation we've had many times in recent years about it. Like it was never really the case, and it still isn't the case, other than like maybe Al Horford. Again, no offense to Al if he's out there not listening, but they don't have a bad contract. You know what I mean? Like they don't have a really kind of ugly but perfectly tradable contract, and that's the kind of thing that really can help you down the line that they've needed. I mean, for a long time, they didn't even have like a contract that was in the middle ground. They had like Marcus Smart making like 12 million, and then it was someone else making 20 to 35 or whatever, depending on whether we're talking about Kyrie or Gordon or whatever. Al obviously, but there was no like something in that 18, 19 range that you were willing or even able to part with. So it would be good to have something like that. That is good for business.
Yeah, it's. And like Seth's point, it's like if you need contracts maybe to add up to another contract at the trade deadline, and having some of those guys that make 5, 6, 7 million if you can get them. And like to point this out, like they don't have to use all the 17 million, by the way. They can up to that 17 million. So
And like, imagine a scenario like, there's the rumors going around about what's going on with Durant right now, which like, nobody thought Durant was going to be available. And now like every team in the league is probably cobbling together like potential trade packages just in case this happens, right? Like
Yeah.
you just never know what's going to happen. And right now, if someone they wanted became available, they would have to either trade, like the only way to put a trade together is to include like Smart or White basically, or Rob Williams or like in the trade package. And so I don't know, it would just be nice to have another contract. Yeah, like
What would you, just for giggles, what would you be willing to give up for Kevin Durant?
okay,
serious.
well, so there's a basketball question here and an emotional question, and the like.
How about the basketball question is really the one that
It would
matters.
make sense to give up like a bunch of like Jaylen and a bunch of stuff basketball wise. It would bring us closer to a championship. I would be absolutely miserable if they did that. I don't want to win that way. It would not be fun to root for that team. It would ruin the experience of like what we just went through watching these guys like build up that way. But like on a purely basketball calculus level, it would make total sense to do it. And if Ainge was still the GM, I would think they would.
It would ruin the regular season because
Yeah.
they're just managing his minutes. He'd be out for 3 weeks. I mean, the whole thing will be just like, okay, wait for the playoffs. And it doesn't matter. What happened with Brooklyn? It doesn't matter if we're a 6 seed or a 7 seed. Hey, we'll be fine in the playoffs. Like, I want no part of that.
Yep.
Basketball or emotionally. I know how good he is. I don't want him. I don't want him. I'd much rather have Jaylen because I like him. He's homegrown and I want to root for him. So
Same.
We've all invested too much time rooting for Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
So it's
Love the man.
Yeah.
I love Jaylen and I love his game and he's gotten better every year. And like, yes, like if Brooklyn came to, it's like, hey, we'll take Jaylen, Flyer, and picks for KD. It's like, geez, I have to really have a real conversation with myself in terms of like, man, do I have because again, it would bring you closer to a title, no question. The problem is you would sacrifice long-term potential with Jaylen and Jason for the immediate short term of having, two of the best wing scorers in the NBA at the same time.
I'd be sacrificing my emotional health. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like I was just like I'm getting emotional thinking about it. I remember when he was a rookie and my brother said he was terrible. I was like, he can't shoot. I'm like, look at his shot though; it's not broken, right? He's got.
Yeah.
It looks like he's going to be a shooter. Like he's got just stick with him. He's got potential there. I'm way too invested in him.
Yeah.
He can't go. He can't go.
It's unbelievable that none of us are like, yeah, like we would do this in a heartbeat.
Well, so I was just gonna say, so Megan's our intern. So Megan, if you're cutting up the shorty for YouTube, just title it like Kevin Durant to Celtics. No thanks.
Four idiots say no.
that ought to do well with the engagement. So we've been going for just about an hour, I think. So I'm going to ask you guys what I never ask, which is just, do you have anything to add as you come down from kind of the emotions of last year and look ahead, obviously, to what's going to be? I mean, honestly, like barring a trade and the use of that $17 million trade exception, what's going to be a pretty boring offseason for the first time in really quite a while. Where's your head at?
I got two takes and I can unload them pretty quick.
Sure.
First take is the one that we've exhausted throughout this entire week, and it's the people that believe that finding a point guard for the Boston Celtics is going to cure all their problems. My favorite part about this whole interaction has been, okay, name me the point guard you would like to have. And it's always Chris Paul. And I'm like, yeah, okay, like, sure. If you could add Chris Paul to this team, or what's the other one that everybody likes to put DeJounte Murray. Like, we didn't talk about DeJounte Murray at all. And I love DeJounte Murray. I just don't see that as like kind of feasible. I think the Spurs should keep DeJounte Murray. Like I just would build around that. So I don't really find that as a viable solution. People are throwing Rubio at me, and I'm like, no, Rubio. The ship has sailed on Rubio. The idea of Rubio was wonderful, but the actual Rubio itself, there's no point guard out there that like Malcolm Brogdon is not as good as Marcus Smart, sorry, and is hurt way more. The guys that people offer to me as explanations are bad. And this comes back to a thing that Seth talked about earlier. And I think we've all maybe spoken on this, but I know Seth and I have talked about this. If you take Marcus Smart out of the point guard position, you automatically devalue your team. Because it's what Marcus Smart might not be a point guard, but he guards point guards. and he allows you to guard up and guard down on the entire roster. Marcus did an amazing job against Giannis, guys. Like, for a guy that's 6 foot, whatever, the fact that he can hold his own against Giannis is amazing. He's never afraid to mix up with bigger guys. And the thing that blows my mind more than anything else is the fact that people can't see that Point Tatum is the future. Like, LeBron James never happened. Like, Kevin Durant's never happening. Like, Giannis isn't doing the same thing. Like, Luka's not doing the same thing. Like, James Harden and Houston do the same. Like, if you can find, and like everybody's like, well, too many turnovers. Like, yeah, because Jason Tatum's 24 years old and you up against like the top 3 defenses in the NBA all in a row. And it's the first time you ever did that. So I would prefer if you gave the ball to Jason Tatum and let him play big point guard and survey the floor versus finding a distributing point guard when your biggest problem is scoring more points in the half court. Like, it's not about ball distribution. They have guys that can do that. It's about half court offense, and getting a ball distributor point guard is not the answer for that. And I fought people all week. It drove me nuts. And I'm pleading with you guys.
I wish you were more passionate about this, Evan.
It's ridiculous. So I had 200. I've never had more interaction on a tweet in my entire life. I had 220 people reply to me, or 220 replies to that particular tweet. And the fact that the majority of them did not get where I was coming from drove me through a wall. And I just need people to understand that, like, Point Tatum is where this team needs to go. This team needs to be built around that to maximize itself. And once you realize that, and that this team is more about staying big defensively with all the guys on the floor at the same time, you'll finally catch up. But it drove me nuts the last 2 days of the week. I could not believe people didn't get that.
Seth, Corey.
Corey, you wanna?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, but like you would think like in this video, like there's gonna be comments that think I'm an idiot, and I'm just here to tell you I'm not. And if you just watch the highlights of like big point forwards, you'll understand where I'm coming from. It's not about a guy that can get everybody into the offense and get Jason and Jaylen easier shots.
Guys, whatever. They don't need a point guard. They just
That's not what
drafted
it's about.
JD Davison anyway.
What?
I said they just drafted JD Davison. They don't need a point guard.
That's my
He's only
second hot
19,
take.
guys.
That's my second hot take. My second hot take is that the Celtics just draft Dennis Smith Jr. at 53.
I hope you're right.
Because
do you?
I watch him, and I'm not saying he's Dennis Smith Jr., but like if he had Dennis Smith Jr.'s career, getting that at 53 is not bad. I like the upside. He's working with lethal shooters, so he's getting better at that. He needs way more seasoning at being an actual point guard, but he's explosive as hell, and that's fun. And to get that sort of trade at 53 isn't bad. And
the hair's great.
I'm not over the David Roddy thing, but I'll get there. I'll get there.
I thought JD Davison was Gerald Green. That's what I thought it was. Part 2, but we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, we'll find out.
So I forgot. So after hearing you, Evan, I forgot that there will be comments to this. So this is, I mean, the Marcus. I feel like the Marcus Smart like deniers. Like it's like the QAnon people. Like it's just ridiculous. Like you can't really speak to them. Like, and like we've talked about this, over text, and I don't like. I really don't understand it. It's like almost like a sociology experiment. Like with this one human being, people cannot understand that he is imperfect, right? Why can't he be a good basketball player, good point guard, average shoot? Why can't he just be a good basketball player and be imperfect? Like, do we do that with any other player? I mean, I don't understand it. I was at Kaufman's house for Game 6, and at some point during the game when they were getting killed in the third quarter, and I looked down and said, Marcus Smart has not attempted a 3 yet. Like, what will people complain about? He has not attempted a 3 in this game, and they're losing by 17 points. Like, it is just amazing to the point that I think you just have to tune them out. Like, he's a very good basketball player. He's a very, I guess it is. He's a very good basketball player, right? He's imperfect and he's very good, just like really all of them. He's part of like a larger team structure, and he's very valuable. Why can't we just leave it at that? He's on a good contract. Like, it's just the whole thing is just dumb. It really is dumb. And it doesn't matter what position he played. You're right. Point Tatum is the future. He's just a good basketball player, and you want good basketball players on the floor. Can't it be that simple? Like, why can't it be that simple? He's a good basketball player. He's a tremendous defender. He's not just a good basketball player. He is an all-world defender. So what is the point? Because he's not a great 3-point shooter? I mean, it's it's maddening. And it's maddening that Celtics fans feel this way about this guy who is literally throwing his ball all over the court every night. Like, it just, yeah, it's.
One might even argue they're not Celtics fans. Like, are these people? I don't know. I just have always had this theory that, like, if you have decided that you're against Marcus Smart, I just would like bet my life that you're not watching these games. Like,
I think there's Celtics fans. Maybe they're not really good basketball fans. I think there's just a misconception about what it takes to be a good player, like how you bring value to a team, right? And I think that in 2022, if you're not shooting, 44% from three, you suck. Right?
Well, I mean, we don't need to go down this rabbit hole, especially in the interest of time. But I mean, look at the first go around for Al Horford. Like, most people, I won't say most people. Well, you know what? Screw it. Most people like didn't get it. Most people were like, this guy stinks because he doesn't average 20 and 10. It's like, are you aware of who they just signed? Because he's never averaged 20 and 10. Like, that's never been his game ever.
Yeah.
The reason why it bothers me to this extent is that, yes, if the Celtics are an average team and they're not playing meaningful games in the playoffs, and you're basing your opinion on like a Tuesday night game against the Hawks, then fine, right? But you're talking about if you're in the playoffs, everyone's watching all these critical possessions. You're seeing it analyzed every day. Like, what the value is. Don't freak out when this guy has a bad shooting night. Like, it's just like, and then devalue everything else he does. And say he needs to be traded. Every time I see an article that says, what should the Celtics do a point guard this year or next year, I lose my mind. Like, what are we doing? Like,
it really is kind of amazing when you think about like all these years where we had all these other smaller point guards, and he was like forced into and he was like game for all these different roles, right? Like, he played shooting guard, he played backup point guard, he guarded power forward sometimes. He like did all this different stuff. And over again, you look up the numbers with him at point guard versus him at shooting guard, and they're better every year. And then the first year we actually like really let him sink his teeth into full-time point guard, we go to the finals. It really is just kind of like amazing.
Yeah.
And you can't blame. I mean, he had a couple tough stretches in the finals, but I can't think of any game in say. I mean, there was that one game where we kind of debated it, where he took the 2 threes. They missed the three. They off the rebound. I can't think of really any of the spot where it's like, oh wow, Marcus Smart really lost you that game. I mean, there were high turnover games, but they were high turnover games for the team. They're all throwing the ball over the place, right? It's not just him. So like,
I mean, more often than not, it was the Jays.
Right.
Like, for all they did well, but more often than not, the Jays had like, I don't know what the percentage is, but 40% of your turnovers? Like, pretty damn close to it.
More than that. And it's just because they're inexperienced at doing that kind of stuff. Like, Jason Tatum has never done that. Like, and that's what bothers me. It's like, you guys don't even watch the game. It's like Tatum is doing an amazing job navigating double teams like this on this stage for the first time in his career. And you guys don't want him to do this anymore? Like, what world are you on? Like, Jason Tatum's going to have the ball in his hands at the end of games. That's what you want. You want him making the decision. It reminds me of that LeBron James pass to Kyle Korver in the corner that everybody gave him flack for because he didn't take the shot. But guess what? That was the right play then, still is the right play now. You want a guy like that controlling the tempo of the game. And then Kyrie comes down the next possession, jacks up a shot way too early, awful shot. Everybody criticized Kyrie for that too. But it's like the idea of Point Tatum getting more experience and getting more comfortable doing that is going to be how this team takes Giannis is terrifying for a multitude of reasons, but the most, the hardest version of the Bucks to guard is when Giannis is spraying the ball all over the floor and everybody else is killing you, because Giannis is going to drop 45. It's about everybody else getting good looks. And when they're all getting good looks, you're going to lose.
Yeah, and the narrative, the immediate aftermath about, is Tatum ready? This was his chance. Is he ready? He's been to so many other Eastern Conference Finals. I think if anyone's really paying attention, this is really the one year where everyone's defense was focused on him, right? Like, he didn't have to deal with this, 3-4 years ago. Everyone's focused on him. He played reasonably well considering. I mean, it wasn't, there were a lot of turnovers.
He wasn't good in the finals. He had a great playoff run overall, but he was not good in the finals.
But he had his moments where, he wasn't good in the finals, but he had his moments where he made the right play and he made up, an amazing pass and made the right play. And Stan Van Gundy says, "Oh, he's doing the right thing."
And also, they made it to the finals.
Yeah, no, look, I'm not. When I say that, I'm not like condemning Tatum. I'm simply saying, like, I mean, the guy was human. Like
I'm just saying,
it happens.
all I'm saying is that, like, yes, he's been in the Eastern Conference Finals several times, but this is to me, this is like their first year, like where he's a superstar. They're treating him like a superstar.
What was
How
the
does
first
he
year that he was the number one option?
Right.
Yeah,
In the expectation that you
yeah.
can just adjust, like, okay, well, they did this to me in game 2, so I'm going to do something completely different in game 3. I just don't think it works that way. Right. I think like he got some really good experience. And I think we all kind of agree he is a superstar, right? I think you'll see, they'll be back in the playoffs next year and he'll be playing better. He'll play better and he'll make smart decisions. The turtles will be cut down. It's that's the trajectory of these superstars, right? Like that's where he's at. He's 24. I mean, so
Right.
it makes sense to me. So, I mean, and for those reasons, I think that, this is a good team a fun team to root for because they're only going to get better.
Can I add one little?
I do want to amend that quick before people call me out, because last year, obviously, like when I say last year, I mean the year before.
The bubble.
Like the bubble. No, not the bubble year. Like the right
when they played Miami in the conference final. Yeah.
No, but that was 2 years ago. I'm saying no, but I'm saying last season.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so not this year, but the year before.
Yeah.
36 and 36.
Yeah, Tatum was certainly like the number one option that year. So I guess to amend my statement, what I meant when I said that was like, it was Tatum and it was Brown and Kemba, and like this was the first year, and Evan and I have talked about it ad nauseum throughout the season. This was the first year that it was like this is Jason Tatum's team, or this is Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown's team. But like, all eyes on those two, and Tatum in particular, for the first time, more than ever anyway. But Landman, did you have anything?
Well, yeah, I just took like, it seems like we're all talking about like what we hope, like kind of what we hope they learned, like, or like how Tatum is going to improve in the future. And I would just say, like, I think one of the things I found myself thinking about before the finals started was that I was really glad we were playing the Warriors, because like I thought like losing to Dallas wouldn't teach you much of anything. It's just going to teach you that you got like torched by one dude, basically. But losing to the Warriors means you had to deal with the Warriors for 6 games. And like the fact that like what makes them click is this sort of like improvisational genius that they have, that you can't, like, the Celtics played great defense, but like the Warriors just grind you down by moving the ball really smartly and unpredictably, and like by being improvisationally great. And what I hope the Celtics learn is that like, yeah, Tatum did become a like way better passer this year, but it does feel like that things got a little too set, or a little too like predictable. Like they're going through certain reads, or they have certain things they're looking for. And what I'm hoping is that they pay a little more attention to like moving in unpredictable ways and just keeping the ball moving, because that's the magic of the Warriors, that the ball just never stops moving.
Yeah, they have the right players for that.
Yeah. So I'm like, to me, like, it's just the perfect team to lose to in the finals, because it's like you saw what beat you, and hopefully you begin to incorporate that into your game.
Well, I hope everyone got something out of this. If nothing else, the 4 of us as sort of a group therapy session. I do think, and this is not like ego talking or whatever. I just think that a lot of what we said, I think, is pretty mainstream to how a lot of fans out there are feeling. I hope. Excuse me if Brad Stevens and
Are you
Mike
getting all choked up?
Yeah, I'm a little emotional about the loss still. Yes. Yeah. For Seth Landman on before, Corey Goodman on for the first time. Shout out your Twitter handles real quick, by the way.
Oh, Slandman 33.
Landman 33. There you go. Corey?
I am. I don't know what I am.
He's looking it up quick. He doesn't even know.
At Corey P. Goodman, Corey.
All right. You know where to find Evan and I. You've been nonstop finding Evan talking about Marcus Smart for days. All right. On to next week. Maybe some free agency news to react to at that point. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.